So our next speaker and last speaker for this session is Professor Yael Yuli Tamir. She is the president of the Beit Berl Teachers Training College, an adjunct professor at the Blavatnik School of Government, Oxford. She was a deputy speaker of the Israeli parliament and served as Israel's ministers of immigration. Here you go, immigration. And then education. We already mentioned education and immigration, and she has a rabbit up her sleeve, apparently, by the abstract.
Thank you for the invitation to be part of this important discussion. I'm not slightly surprised that the nation state is still with us, or nationalism. In the years that everybody thought it would disappear, I was sort of insisting on that being a permanent feature of political entities. So I'm not sure I'm delighted to be right, but I feel that many of the claims that are made today um, have been quite obvious to me for years. What I would like to contribute to this discussion, I think, is first of all trying to focus on fewer questions than were raised. Partly because now it seems that the end of democracy is related to everything, from climate change to food patterns to the economy to everything. And it's true, political changes do relate to a variety of things. It's very hard to focus on one specific thing because there will be no change unless we focus on something that is really massive and maybe has the potential to make a difference. So naturally, because I'm an educator, I look at education, and it's not that I have a solution, but I think I have an understanding of what does not work and where did um, a process of change through education work. Because we must be, I think, aware of the fact that political changes have been made, and they were made effectively not necessarily in the liberal direction, but they were made effectively in many countries. And education always played a massive role in success. And nationalism is the best, I think, example. Israel is a great example. I think through education, in what is historically a relatively short period of time, we created a functional culture, language, invented our traditions, our narratives, and so on, and we function on these invented qualities that were spread by education, and for the generations now born in Israel, they are a fact of life. Nobody questions them. Uh, there is not really an undermining of the Israeli narrative. This is a huge success of an education system. So I don't take it lightheartedly that some things have been done in this place in a period of less than 70 years very effectively. And I'm asking myself why democratic education doesn't work and are there any conditions under which it can work. So maybe there will be some overlap with what Larry said. Okay, this does not work. Oh, okay. Oh, so this is a very known saying that is on the Boston library. Everybody, I think, that ever dealt with education knows it, and it reflects the very, I think, simplistic, maybe naive assumption that the more educated we are, the more able we are to contend the complexities of liberal democracy, and therefore we are more inclined to support democratic regimes. So this is a very old Enlightenment assumption that for individuals to participate in democracy, they need to know more or to know something at least. But then it was taken also as an evidence of the reverse that if they know, they will be effective citizens, which is, as we know, causality doesn't work in, simultaneously in both ways. So apparently you need some knowledge to function as a democratic agent. The fact that you have some knowledge does not mean that you are an effective democratic agent or that you are a democratic agent at all. And that's very disappointing to all of us who used to believe in this narrative. So this is just to show something that is happening in the world. This is good, apart from all the bad things that happen. Many, 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 many more people are educated, right? There's an outburst of education since the 30s in all levels of education, so you can see it on this chart. And it is quite amazing that we are now witnessing the most educated period in the history of the world. Something that, given all the troubles we're facing, not only is quite disappointing, but it's quite surprising because we have all this power and we're so ineffective in what we're doing. So I will not deliberate too much on that because Larry did it so well, but democracy is becoming more and more fragile. We know it. And what we see is that there is a growing distrust in democracies, while there are, as I said, many more educated people. So the correlation between education and democratic tendency is less, for me, less obvious than it was. And I'm asking myself, what is happening? So here it is. We have a more educated world uh, and a less democratic world. And what is even more interesting are two other facts. First of all, the people who vote are more educated than the people who don't vote. Then among the voters, we have even a more democratic voting body than among the population. So it's not that the people who are educated have just given up and are not voting or something. They are voting. They're actually voting in order to protect or promote their interests. So I don't know how to calculate it. I'm sure there are ways. I'm still working on it. It's a paper that is in progress. What is the ratio of educated voters? And it's higher than, obviously, Tamar maybe no, it's higher than the proportion in the population. The other thing is that younger generations are more educated. And then look, I mean, this is the most depressing slide I've seen. Oh no, maybe not the most depressing, among the most depressing slides I've seen recently, because it shows that the dedication of people to democracy drops with age. So the millennials are not interested in democracy. I think we are quite able to say this right now, which is very bad news. I think a lot of people used to say, well, there are countries in the world, for example, I think United States is a good example for that, because of diversity, because new people are being educated and are going to vote. Therefore, the younger generation are going to be more interested in democracy, and there will be more Democrats than Republicans, right? I think 2 years ago, there was this trend of saying America is going to stay democratic for years because of the change of the demographics. No, that's not going to work. And a lot of the people who mature to a voting age, A, do not vote, B, if they vote, are not necessarily Democrats, and C, are not necessarily inclined to see developing democratic values as a central theme in their worldview. Again, this is again something that for me is quite shocking. The share of respondents saying that democracy is a bad way to run their country is very, very um, clearly attached to age. I mean, here are the good guys. Now it's very, for me, it's it's sort of you're a distinguished person if you're older because you're more likely to be democratic, liberal, understanding of the complexities of the world and all the good things that lead to democracy. Younger people don't get it, but it's our fault. Okay, so while maybe the older are more cautious with the political judgment. The younger generations that we educated have no idea why democracy is good for them. And if that is true, then the question of where we're going is it's quite obvious. So it's not a great mystery when these people become more, the part in the population grows, their non-democratic tendencies, they're not anti-democratic tendencies. It's I suspend my judgment policy. And some of them just say, I don't care because I don't think it's a good thing, democracy. So who cares? So why is it happening? Well, and I'm trying really to focus on education because, as we heard, there are many reasons. So I would like to offer three major explanations. All of them probably are partial, I would say, but maybe from them or from a combination of them, we can understand something about the challenge we're facing. So the most, I think, Martha Nussbaum, great book, not for profit, is all about the weakening of the teaching of the humanity and capitalism, which was mentioned earlier, that actually created a shift in the tasks of education from moral education into skills and tools for economic success. So we trade the desire to create virtuous personalities with the desire to create human capital, and that was disastrous. So Marta's solution is to bring back the humanities. And obviously I like the solution because I like the humanities, but I'm sort of suspicious that in itself this can make a difference. I wrote actually a foreword that became an afterword for her book, and I wrote that one picture that always follows me about the correlation between humanities and democracy is a wonderful film done on the Berlin Orchestra. And it starts with a concert. The orchestra plays for Hitler. And Goebbels is representing the concert. They play Beethoven. They sing Heine. They are very well versed in all the wonderful literature of humanitarian literature. And then they go out, they salute Hitler, and they exterminate the Jews. So I think for me, this is obviously the most extreme example, but I'm sort of suspicious that just if you know your Plato, Kant, and whatever, you become more humanitarian or more democratic. And I think we have to actually try and find some hard facts about what do people in the humanities really find as the most essential commitment that they acquire through their learning. And I think this is the obvious question is no more obvious for me. And partly what is happening now in the universities in America shows me or shows a little bit of the I'd say simplified way students of the humanities may be thinking under circumstances of crisis. So I'm less enthusiastic for that purpose to offer the, let's teach more the humanities, and maybe we should think more about it and understand the real correlation between these kinds of teachings and political agency. So if the previous assumption that educated people these days know too little The other assumption is that they know too much. They actually know it doesn't work, and it doesn't work for them, and it doesn't work for many of them. So we spoke earlier about the failures of democracy and where democracies fail. And I think one of our failures as Democrats or liberal Democrats is that we were very slow in acknowledging that. So we had a sort of intuitive defense of democracy, disrespecting its failures or not admitting its failures or not coping with its failures. Democracy was good. When people say it's not working for me, you said, you are, as Hillary Clinton unfortunately said, these are the deplorable, the people who don't understand anything, who never learned, or just naturally disrespectful of human being. Well, some of the claims, I think this is the main claim of my recent book, some of the claims these people make are true. And dismissing them make them or alienates them from democratic processes. So they know something that is important for their political agency and just follow it. So that might be true that people say, okay, I live in a democratic country like the United States or many other democracies, and I find that it's not working. Maybe I don't have an alternative, as we used to say, but I'm not that enthusiastic about what happens now, so I'm not really interested or not really committed, or I really don't care. And, if sort of logical, if you have no solution or you have no answer to the question, what's the best way to run a country, not to really care which way the country is run because you don't really know what works. So I think there is a big, well-informed skepticism about democracy that we didn't respect, and therefore we didn't see this group of people that I think we should pay more attention to what they say because uh, they point to our blindness, and we should be worried about. And the third assumption is the worst, because I started looking at ways of democratization. And I realized that actually, among the classical three ways of democracy, um, I actually stopped believing that they were actually ways of democratization. They were ways of installing democratic regimes, which is not the same thing as saying that they were ways of democratization. So, very briefly, and this is a huge generalization, but so there is the before 19 United States and England, countries that maybe have stronger roots in democracy, and it's a question of the United States and England are not similar to each other, but there are some similarities, at least in seeing democracy as one of the founding building blocks of their political community. But then I think most democratic countries established post World War I were declared as democracies for external reasons because it was convenient and part of the tools to gain independence. And wanting to gain independence was the real thing they wanted, and democracy was a way of getting there. Which means that the real commitment, which is now surfacing, is that of national independence. And democracy just remains as something that, sometimes an embarrassment, sometimes something very important, but not really the essence of the national struggle. So whether it was because of process of post-colonization, whether it was because after World War II the desire to be identified with the good guys, and certainly when the Soviet Union collapsed, it was I think, quite clear that most of the countries that were created after the collapse of the former Soviet Union had very thin democratic crust, and they just, you can be communist or Democrat. So, no, That's the alternative. So that's, I suppose, like a fallback position. And I'm not sure they ever internalized deeply or wanted to internalize deeply the democratic set of values. So before I'll get to that, it's not a solution, but it's just thinking about what is effective to do. I would say that there are good reasons for the indifference to democracy in present day Western countries. I know nothing about Africa, and I'm not trying even to say something about not about the African state and not about East Asian state. But in the West, there are good reasons to assume that democracy is very thin. The commitment to democracy is not very deep rooted, and for many people, the fact that democracy is collapsing is a fact. So one of our major problems is that we don't understand how what concerns us is of a much lesser concern to many, many people, even in the West. And their concerns are in the economic sphere, and maybe, as Tamar said, on ecological issues. And they want solutions, but they have less of a commitment to democracy. So the question is really what could bring the democratic what could bring the virtues of democracy closer to people's hearts and minds. I mean, we have to sort of reestablish. My assumption is it's not there, the democratic spirit. We have to rekindle it, and we have to think what makes it important for people. And I think that's the dialogue we should be having. The education could be part of it, but it cannot be, and that's my view about education on other matters as well. Unfortunately, Korchak was wrong. You don't change education in order to change the world. You change the world, and then whatever you've decided to do, education helps you to sustain that. And unless there is a democratic desire to change political system, to strengthen political attitude, to make political agents more effective, and unless we give people through democratic processes what they need and want, then you can say in class whatever, it's of no significance. But if we do something of significance, then education can reinforce it and maybe make it much more of a way of thinking for younger people. So it's working with, I think, two tools. One is of changing the reality, and the other one is education. As I said, it could be done. And again, nationalism has been the greatest success of the last, 200 years. It worked. People invented nation, created languages. They did hysterical things, right? Because it was what they needed. It answered their real needs. So the real question for me is what kind of human needs democracy serves? Can it serve it? How can we convince people it is serving him? And then we can tell them, because it is serving your needs, what is, I think, the natural role of a government, let's find ways of preserving it together. And then I think we can move back to a stage of how to do it, how to educate for it, and so on. So lots of work to do. This is the good thing of this crisis. We know we are never going to be, unemployed. Philosophers and educators are going to be in employment for the foreseeable future. There is this joke about a very little town in Europe, and a man comes to the rabbi and he says, I have no work. Could you offer me something? I need to feed my children. And the rabbi said, yes, I have a job for you. We are a very small town. I want you to sit in the major junction, and when the Messiah comes, tell him that we're here because we don't want him to skip over our little town. And the guy says, well, what's the pay? And the rabbi said, it's very small, but it's permanent. So good luck to all of us.